Coming up on Arirang News, South Koreans head to the polls to cast their ballots in early voting for next week's general election. Turnout is at a record high for this point in early voting, with precautions taken for COVID-19. South Korea confirms just 27 new cases of the coronavirus, the fewest it's had since February 20th, an encouraging sign that the country's tight quarantine measures are working. And South Korean researchers have mapped key parts of the coronavirus's RNA, finding the parts that are active, which will help an eventual vaccine stop it more effectively. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea will hold a general election next week on April 15th, and today is the first day of early voting. People have the opportunity to cast their ballots ahead of time today and tomorrow between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Things are different this time because of the coronavirus, as our Kim Mo-gyun reports.
Voters headed to some 3,500 polling stations nationwide on Friday to cast their ballots for the 300 parliamentary seats that will make up the 21st National Assembly. After presenting valid ID, voters received 2 ballots, one to pick candidates for their specific districts and one to choose candidates under the nationwide proportional representation system. There's a great deal of attention on turnout during the early voting period because in the past 2 large-scale elections, this is when more than 1/5 of the total electorate cast their ballots. Despite concerns about the coronavirus pandemic, turnout as of 4 p.m. has been tallied at 9.74%, which is the highest percentage ever recorded at this point in early voting. Citizens say it's even more important to exercise their right to vote at this difficult time.
I think overcoming this difficult time by coming out to vote shows the power of the people and the power of our votes.
Because so many people are going through hard times right now, I came by from work with the hope of creating a better country for our citizens.
As part of efforts to reduce the spread of the virus, the National Election Commission has been disinfecting all polling stations nationwide. When voters enter the polling station, authorities check their temperatures, ask them to spray disinfectants on their hands, wear gloves, and put on a mask. The polling stations are sanitized regularly, and when people wait in line, they're required to stay at least a meter away from each other. The commission also set up special polling stations for voters who've been diagnosed with COVID-19.
COVID-19 patients who pre-registered can vote at their respective hospitals and medical centers. Those who are under quarantine at medical centers and weren't able to register can cast their ballots at special early polling stations.
There are 8 such polling stations up and running at treatment centers across the nation. The NEC says it's still in the process of deciding how to enable people to vote while in self-quarantine. The details of that, it said, will be announced on April 12th. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
Yet another sign South Korea's efforts to contain the coronavirus are working. The country confirmed just 27 new cases of COVID-19 on Friday, with no new cases in the worst affected city of Daegu. This is the lowest number of daily new cases since February 20th, when the country confirmed 16 of them. The total now stands at 10,450. Of the new ones, 9 were in Gyeonggi-do province and 7 were in Gyeongsang-buk-do province. South Korea reported 4 more deaths, bringing the death toll to 208. The total number who've recovered is now more than 7,100. And South Korean researchers have succeeded in coming up with a high-resolution map of the novel coronavirus. The RNA research team at the Institute for Basic Science worked with the Korea National Institute of Health using some innovative techniques to identify the virus's active parts. By mapping the virus, they can more clearly see how it mutates to evade the body's immune system. Their discoveries could help an eventual vaccine stop the virus more effectively. President Moon Jae-in and Microsoft founder Bill Gates have agreed to step up their cooperation in developing vaccines and treatments for COVID-19. In a phone call Friday made at the request of Gates, Moon said that the South Korean government is expanding support for research institutions and pharmaceutical companies, saying that the development of treatments is as important as vaccine development. Gates agreed, saying that'll help reduce the number of deaths as well as ease the burden on medical staff. Gates said South Korea's response system has become a model for the world and praised the government for supplying virus testing kits to developing countries. The U.S. Federal Reserve is taking additional moves to support the American economy as it struggles through the pandemic. The Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said the central bank is committed to providing as much support as possible, insisting that the U.S. economy will rebound once the virus is under control. Kim Yo-sun reports.
The Federal Reserve on Thursday rolled out a massive $2.3 trillion plan to stabilize the U.S. economy amid the coronavirus pandemic. The Fed said in a statement that the move is aimed at keeping markets functioning and supporting the economy, which has been hit hard by the rapid spread of the coronavirus. The move also came after Washington reported that 6.6 million new jobless claims were filed just last week. The Fed's measures include major business lending programs, as well as other market intervention initiatives, such as plans to buy corporate bonds and commercial mortgage-backed securities. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell stressed the role of the central bank is to provide as much relief and stability as possible during such dark times.
We are deploying these lending powers to an unprecedented extent, enabled in large part by the financial backing from the Congress and the Treasury. We will continue to use these powers forcefully, proactively, and aggressively until we're confident that we are solidly on the road to recovery.
Speaking in a webcast from the Brookings Institution, he also explained that the U.S. economy will rebound as soon as the virus is fully under control.
When the virus does run its course and it's safe to go back to work and safe for businesses to open, then we would expect there to be a fairly quick rebound as people do go back to work and start resuming normal levels of economic activity. I think most people expect that to happen in the second half of this year after the second quarter, which of course ends on June 30.
Nevertheless, he also hinted that economic growth for the second quarter would be very weak with a high level of unemployment. Meanwhile, the IMF chief said Thursday that the COVID-19 pandemic will turn global economic growth, quote, sharply negative this year. Describing the situation as the worst economic crisis the world faces since the Great Depression of the 1930s, Kristalina Georgieva also forecasts that the world will only see a partial recovery in 2021. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
After weeks of uncertainty, the European Union has finally agreed on a €500 billion stimulus plan to safeguard the regional economy from the worst of the coronavirus outbreak. The chairman of the Eurogroup, Mario Centeno, announced the deal on Thursday following marathon talks in Brussels. The plan will shore up three safety nets. First, by protecting workers and their livelihoods, especially those who are self-employed, through flexible work schemes and benefits. Second, it'll give more support to hard-hit businesses, chiefly with €200 billion in loans for small and medium-sized firms. And third, it'll establish a pandemic crisis support scheme worth €240 billion to support member states. The plan, however, does not include the issuance of so-called corona bonds, which for weeks had been at the heart of contention between northern and southern member states. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time today.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, the OPEC Plus group, including Russia, have agreed to cut oil output by 10 million barrels a day for the next 2 months. Still, oil prices fell further. What's happening there?
Yes, as you said, U.S. crude dipped below $24 yesterday, giving back most of the gains, plus declining by far. Earlier trading day, it surged 12% as the OPEC and plus countries agreement was expected to happen. But it seems that the people are concerned about the level of drop in the global fuel demand. It seems that it's going down by 30% plus at this point in time. So even though 10 million barrels per day reduction of production is a good news, but nevertheless, the decline of the fuel demand is putting the pressure on the oil price movement. However, though, we think that this kind of 30% drop in the global fuel demand is not going to be something that will stay forever. We do think that that number should shrink, and therefore the production decline by 10 million barrels per day should be quite positive news overall. We think that the oil price is probably in a band where it's not going to go down further too much. Some people were saying it might go down to the low teens, but I don't think that it's going to break $20 anymore in the future. And probably in the future, it might have a little bit of a leg up to somewhere between $30 to $40 range. The reason, though, it's not going to go above $40 is because the structural change is happening. And the movement between where the gasoline cars to the electric car is actually rapidly happening. And therefore, we think that the overall demand side is probably much less than previous cycle. So if that's the case, then yes, the production cut is good news, but we think that the upside potential for oil price should be fairly limited.
Got it. Well, stocks on Wall Street overnight held steady in the midst of all that. In fact, we're up more than 1%. Korean stocks today up as well. What's happening in the global stock markets?
Right. The news of the unemployment benefit came in at quite a high number, over 6 million again. So total of about 17 million people are applying for these unemployment benefits. Clearly, that is a huge number. That's over 11% unemployment ratios. That was definitely a negative news for the market at the beginning. However, though, Wall Street ended higher on Thursday because extending gains due to the Federal Reserve, the Fed, coming out with another broad 2.3 trillion won stimulus support, which will support the local government as well as small, medium-sized businesses. With this, we are seeing a liquidity injection being very large. We are seeing M2 growth rate reaching over 14%, which is a record high level since 1980s that we see the numbers. Clearly, huge liquidity is benefiting the overall equity market. And with the news of the European deciding that the boosting measures close to 19% of GDP overall is also pushing the market go up higher. And because of that, Korean market actually closed by more than plus 1% today.
And we're also seeing gold spike up again, but this is a little different than what happened last month when the coronavirus was becoming a pandemic, because last month the gold price fell in tandem with stocks. So why the rebound right now?
Right. The reason for that is because of a huge liquidity injection that's happening global scale. More money supply that coming through that creates a value of dollars or value of the various currencies to go down because basically they're printing money. And because of that, the gold, which is considered as one of the substitute to the currency, the demand and is actually rising. And that's why we have seen the gold price reaching one of the highest levels that we haven't seen. It's up more than 3.3% yesterday. It has hit the 1740 range, which is one of the record high level of the gold price. We think that as long as continuation of liquidity injection happens from the central banks, gold price is not going to go down in the future. So we think that there will be continuation of interest by the investors in the future.
Well, that'll be interesting to watch. All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for coming on and have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Now, with people in South Korea staying home because of the coronavirus, credit card spending offline has gone down and online spending has gone up. Data from 8 of Korea's main card companies show offline credit card purchases last month were down more than 10% on year to some $25 billion US. Online credit card spending jumped more than 22% to around $8 billion. So the overall total of $33 billion was an on-year decline of 4%. This is the first time the overall figure has declined on year since April 2014. The boy band BTS have written another page into South Korea's music history. They've become the biggest-selling K-pop music act in history in terms of global album sales. According to their management agency, Big Hit Entertainment, BTS's total album sales have topped 20 million units as of the end of March. 7 of their 14 albums have sold more than 1 million copies, including all 3 editions of the Love Yourself trilogy and the 2 Map of the Soul albums. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.